"You're good, Maddie, but talent like yours is easy to replace." The words sliced through the open office like glass. I stood by my desk, a stack of client reports in my hand, heat rushing to my cheeks. Everyone froze. Trent Lawson, my boss of 6 months, smirked and walked away, coffee in hand. I remember my fingers trembling, not from fear, but rage. The air felt thick. My co-workers looked down at their keyboards, pretending they hadn't heard. But they had. Everyone had. That sentence hung in the room like smoke, and I knew right then that something inside me had shifted. I wasn't going to forget this moment. Not ever. The reports nearly slipped from my hands, but I gripped them tighter. My jaw clenched. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him take it back. Instead, I stood there frozen as he disappeared around the corner. That's when I realized the truth. He actually believed what he'd just said. That's the day I learned I wasn't valued, just used. My name is Madison Cole, Senior Account Manager at Holston Keane Agency, at least I was. I'd spent 5 years building client relationships from scratch, staying late, fixing Trent's mistakes quietly. Nobody knew how many times I'd saved deals he'd nearly destroyed with his carelessness. I answered emails at midnight, took calls during weekends, and never complained. I thought loyalty mattered. I thought hard work would be recognized. But now he'd made it clear. I was disposable. Just another name on the roster, easily swapped out like a broken printer. The worst part wasn't the insult itself, it was how casually he'd said it, like he was commenting on the weather. Like my 5 years meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. I walked back to my desk, set the reports down carefully, and opened my laptop. My hands still shook, but my mind had already started working. If I was so replaceable, then let's see what happens when I'm actually gone. When I first joined, the office was family. We celebrated birthdays, shared ideas, laughed through late nights over Chinese takeout and impossible deadlines. My first week, the team threw me a welcome party with cupcakes and terrible jokes. I met clients who became friends, colleagues who became mentors. We genuinely cared about each other's success. Friday afternoons meant gathering in the break room to share wins and losses. The energy was electric, hopeful. Then Trent arrived, fresh suit, empty eyes, and a smile that never reached them. Within weeks, everything changed. He slashed budgets without warning, claimed credit for projects he hadn't touched, and turned teamwork into competition. Suddenly, we weren't collaborating anymore. We were fighting for scraps of approval. The cupcakes stopped. The laughter died. People started eating lunch alone at their desks, guarding their ideas like state secrets. Trent had brought something toxic into our space, something that slowly poisoned the culture we built. And I watched it happen, helpless, as the family I'd known crumbled into strangers. He reassigned my biggest client, Brightleaf Foods, to test team adaptability. Translation, he wanted to prove he didn't need me. I smiled and said, "Of course, Trent," while my stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. That account was my baby. I'd landed Brightleaf 3 years ago when they were a small regional brand, convinced them to take a chance on us. I'd built their campaigns from the ground up, learned their values, knew their team by first name. Their marketing director trusted me completely. We'd grown together, celebrated their national expansion, weathered their tough quarters. And now Trent was handing them to Kevin and Marcus, 2 junior associates who barely knew the difference between brand voice and brand identity. I wanted to argue, to fight back, to demand he reconsider. But I knew how that would look: territorial, selfish, unable to adapt. So I swallowed the protest burning in my throat and nodded like a good soldier. Inside, though, I was screaming. This wasn't about adaptability. This was about control. About showing me my place. Within 2 weeks, Brightleaf's emails grew colder. Deadlines slipped. Their marketing director, Hannah Lee, stopped replying to the team's messages. I watched from the sidelines as Kevin sent increasingly desperate follow-ups that went unanswered. Marcus kept asking me for advice in hushed tones by the coffee machine, looking panicked. "She won't respond to anything," he whispered. "What did you used to do?" I wanted to help, but Trent had made it clear this wasn't my account anymore. So I stayed quiet, watched the slow-motion disaster unfold. Hannah's assistant started CCing me on emails, subtle hints that they missed our old rhythm. Campaign approvals that used to take hours now dragged for days. Trent blamed me, said I hadn't built systems strong enough to function without me. You made yourself indispensable instead of building a sustainable process, he announced in a meeting, like that was somehow my failure. That night I cried in my car before forcing myself to stop. Tears wouldn't fix this, but patience might. I didn't fight back, at least not loudly. Instead, I started documenting everything. Every misstep, every lie, every stolen credit. My Google Drive became my armor, organized into folders with dates and screenshots. I saved emails where Trent claimed my strategies as his own ideas. I recorded meeting notes where he blamed failures on others. I documented the times he promised clients things we couldn't deliver, then left me to clean up the mess. Every late night I'd spent fixing his mistakes, every client complaint I'd quietly resolved, every false stat he'd presented to executives, all of it carefully filed away. If Trent wanted a war of proof, I'd bring receipts. I wasn't sure what I'd do with all this information yet, but I knew it mattered. Evidence was power, and I was building an arsenal in silence. Nobody knew what I was doing. I came in early, stayed late, smiled politely at Trent's condescending comments. But behind my calm expression, I was preparing for what exactly I didn't know yet. But I'd learned something important. Revenge didn't need to be loud. It just needed to be thorough. During a Monday meeting, Trent interrupted my presentation on our quarterly performance. Let's skip the fluff, Maddie. We all know you like to talk more than execute. The conference room went silent. I was mid-sentence, explaining how we'd increased client retention by 18%. Laughter from the team stung like wasps. Nervous, uncomfortable laughter, but laughter nonetheless. Some people looked away. Others smirked, grateful it wasn't them in the crosshairs. I felt my face flush hot, but I refused to look down. I held eye contact with Trent, steady and cold, while my heart hammered against my ribs. He wanted me to crack, to stammer, to apologize. Instead, I closed my laptop slowly. You'll get the execution numbers by noon, I said flatly, my voice cutting through the awkward tension. Then I gathered my things and walked out, spine straight, head high. Only when I reached the bathroom did I let my hands shake. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, taking deep breaths. This was calculated cruelty, public humiliation designed to break me. But I wouldn't break. Not here, not now, not for him. That afternoon, Brightleaf's marketing director called me directly on my cell phone. Maddie, it's Hannah. Where's the old energy? These new guys don't get us at all. My heart raced. I stepped outside into the parking lot for privacy, away from listening ears. I'm no longer assigned to your account, Hannah, I said softly, carefully. Trent thought it would be good to bring in fresh perspectives. There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear her breathing, processing. Then I don't want to work with them, she said finally, her voice firm. You understand our brand. You know our story. These guys are they're going through motions. Everything feels generic now. I closed my eyes, choosing my words carefully. I appreciate that, Hannah, but this isn't my call anymore. Another pause. Then maybe it's time we reconsidered some things on our end. The line went quiet for a moment before she added, I'll be in touch. When she hung up, I stood there in the parking lot, phone still pressed to my ear, realizing something had just shifted. The ground beneath Trent's feet had started to crack. By Friday, 3 clients had requested me back specifically. Trent brushed it off during our team huddle. Just nostalgia. They'll adjust. But when 2 of those clients threatened to pull their contracts entirely unless I was reassigned to their accounts, his smirk faltered. I watched him process this information during a meeting with the executives, saw the colour drain slightly from his face. He tried to spin it as temporary adjustment issues, growing pains, nothing serious. We're implementing new systems. he explained smoothly, gesturing with his hands like he was conducting an orchestra. There's always resistance to change. But the executives weren't buying it completely. I could see doubt creeping into their expressions. One of them glanced at me across the table, a question in her eyes that she didn't ask out loud. I stayed silent through all of it, taking notes like always, nodding when appropriate. I didn't defend myself or gloat or point fingers. I just let the situation speak for itself. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Let the truth reveal itself naturally without your fingerprints on it. Trent left that meeting walking faster than usual, his confidence cracked. To save face, Trent began claiming my old strategies as his own invention. In presentations to upper management, he talked about his approach to client relationship building, the same techniques I'd developed over 5 years of trial and error. He described his philosophy of personalized communication, the exact framework I'd created and taught to the team. He even used my specific phrases word for word, as if he'd coined them himself. During one all-hands meeting, he presented a case study on client retention using Brightleaf as an example. When I designed this strategy 3 years ago, he said confidently, clicking through slides that showed results from campaigns I'd personally managed, I knew we needed to prioritize authentic connection over transactional interaction. I sat in the back row watching him bask in applause for work he hadn't done. The irony was almost funny. Almost. He was building his reputation on my foundation while simultaneously calling me replaceable. The contradiction didn't seem to bother him at all, but I noticed other people noticing. Confused glances, raised eyebrows. My co-workers knew the truth, even if they wouldn't say it out loud. The Emperor was wearing stolen clothes, and eventually someone would point it out. I realized revenge didn't have to be loud or dramatic. It just had to be patient and inevitable. My job wasn't to hurt Trent or destroy his career with some elaborate scheme. My job was simply to make my absence unforgettable, to let the natural consequences of his decisions play out without interference. I stopped trying to fix things behind the scenes. When Kevin asked me for advice on handling Hannah's concerns, I politely declined. Trent wants you to figure it out independently. When clients called me directly, I redirected them through proper channels. I followed every rule, completed every task, and never once overstepped my newly diminished role. I became exactly what Trent claimed I should be. Just another team member, nothing special, easily replaceable. And in doing so, I let the cracks in his system grow wider. Sometimes the best revenge is simply stepping aside and letting someone fail on their own merits. No sabotage needed. No dramatic confrontations required. Just patience, documentation, and the quiet certainty that truth has a way of surfacing eventually. I went home each night feeling lighter, knowing I wasn't fighting anymore. I was just waiting. And waiting is easier than fighting. HR called me into their office on a Tuesday morning. The director, a woman named Patricia, sat across from me with a folder and an uncomfortable expression. Maddie, Trent has expressed concerns that your role might be redundant given current team capabilities. We're evaluating restructuring options. The words were corporate soft, cushioned in HR language, but their meaning was clear. They were considering letting me go. I smiled calmly, surprising even myself with how steady I felt. Then I guess you'll find out soon if it really was redundant, I said simply. No anger in my voice, just fact. Patricia's face twitched, uncertainty flashing across her features. She'd expected me to fight, to defend myself, to present evidence of my value. Instead, I was offering them permission to make their mistake. We're just exploring options, she said quickly, backtracking slightly. Nothing's decided. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I understand. Let me know what you need from me. I walked out knowing something fundamental had already begun to crumble in the foundation of Holston Keane. Something that couldn't be stopped now, even if they wanted to. One by one, clients demanded to speak only with Madison for their accounts. The requests came through official channels now, formal emails to executives, some even threatening contract reviews. Hannah from Brightleaf sent a detailed letter explaining why she felt the quality of service had declined significantly since my reassignment. Other clients followed suit, each one carefully professional but unmistakably clear. They wanted me specifically, or they'd consider other agency options. Trent tried rotating different team members through these accounts, thinking the issue was just personality fit. He assigned his most experienced people, hoping someone would stick. Each time, deals fell apart like wet paper. Presentations that should have been home runs barely made it to first base. Client calls ended early with vague promises to reconnect later that never materialized. Internal panic spread through the office like wildfire. People whispered in hallways, exchanged worried looks during meetings. The executives started asking questions in increasingly sharp tones. Meanwhile, I continued doing my reduced workload efficiently and quietly, watching the chaos unfold around me like a storm I was no longer standing in. I felt oddly calm, detached, like watching a movie I'd already seen. The ending was inevitable now. After losing the Brightleaf contract renewal, a 6-figure annual account that had been with us for 3 years, Trent stormed into my small office, face red, jaw clenched. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded, slamming his hand on my desk. Papers scattered, my coffee mug rattled. I looked him dead in the eye, my expression neutral, voice calm. "My job," I said simply, nothing more. His eyes narrowed. He wanted an admission, a confession that I was sabotaging him somehow, but there was nothing to confess. I was doing exactly what I was told, staying in my lane, not overstepping, letting the new team handle things. "You're poisoning them against us," he hissed, leaning closer. I didn't lean back. "I haven't contacted any of them inappropriately. Check my emails, if you want. Check my call logs." He stood there breathing hard, realizing he had nothing concrete to accuse me of. I'd been perfectly professional by the book, exactly what he'd demanded. That night, he sent an email to HR formally recommending my termination, citing poor team integration and negative impact on company culture. Patricia forwarded it to me by accident, then quickly recalled it. But I'd already read it. I'd already saved it. Evidence just like everything else. When I packed my things on my last day, I didn't cry. The decision had been made quickly after Trent's email, a mutual agreement that I'd resign, with 2 weeks' severance. I could have fought it, could have made noise about wrongful termination, but I was tired. And honestly, I was ready to leave. My team avoided my eyes as I loaded my desk supplies into a cardboard box, except for one young designer named Alex, who lingered near my cubicle. "You didn't deserve this," he whispered when no one else was nearby. I smiled at him, genuine and warm. "It's okay, Alex, I'm not gone, I'm just leaving first." "There's a difference." He looked confused but nodded. I walked out carrying my box, past Trent's office where he sat pretending to be on the phone, past the conference room where we'd celebrated so many wins, past the coffee machine that had witnessed 1,000 conversations. The receptionist hugged me at the door, tears in her eyes. "You were the best thing about this place," she said softly. Outside, the sun was shining. My car was parked in the same spot where I'd cried weeks ago, but I wasn't crying now. I set the box in my trunk and drove away without looking back. I took time off, a full month. No revenge plots, no drama, no job hunting, just silence and space to breathe. I jogged every morning along the river path near my apartment, something I hadn't done in years. I read books that weren't about marketing or business strategy. I cooked actual meals instead of eating takeout at my desk. I reconnected with old friends who'd faded during my years of 60-hour work weeks. And slowly, carefully, I reached out to my former clients personally. Not to poach them or badmouth Trent, but just to say thank you. Thank you for the years of trust, for the projects we'd built together, for believing in my ideas. I sent handwritten notes, made brief phone calls, kept everything warm and professional. They asked where I'd gone, what happened, why I'd left so suddenly. I told them the truth, but gently. Sometimes companies restructure and it was time for me to explore new opportunities. I never blamed Trent directly. I didn't have to. They could read between the lines. And more importantly, they remembered how it felt to work with me compared to how it felt now. That contrast spoke louder than any complaint I could have made. A rival agency, VantageWorks, reached out during my 3rd week off. Their director of client services, a man named David, called me directly. "Madison, we've been hearing things through the industry grapevine. We heard you left Holston Keane. Would you consider leading our client relations team?" My voice was steady, but my heart pounded in my chest like a drum. This was exactly the kind of opportunity I'd hoped for, but hadn't dared to expect so quickly. "I'd be interested in hearing more," I said carefully. We met for coffee that afternoon. David explained that VantageWorks was smaller than Holston but growing fast, with a reputation for treating both clients and employees well. They needed someone with my experience to help scale their client services without losing the personal touch. The offer was generous: better title, better salary, full creative control over my department. But more than that, it felt right. The culture seemed genuine. People smiled like they meant it. There was energy in their office that reminded me of Holston's early days, before Trent. I accepted the offer that same week. "Yes," I told David, shaking his hand. "Let's build something good." On my first week at VantageWorks, Brightleaf's marketing director called me again. "Maddie, I heard through the grapevine you moved to VantageWorks. Is it true?" Hannah's voice was excited, almost relieved. "It is," I confirmed, smiling despite myself. "Started on Monday, actually." There was a pause then. "We're moving our account to VantageWorks, but only if you personally handle it. Would that be possible?" My heart jumped. This was huge, not just for me, but for my new agency. Brightleaf was a major account, the kind that could validate a smaller agency's capabilities. "Absolutely," I said, trying to keep my voice professional despite the rush of satisfaction flooding through me. "I'd be honored to work with you again, Hannah." We scheduled a transition meeting. 2 days later, Brightleaf's legal team sent formal notice to Holston Keane that they were terminating their contract and moving to a new agency. I heard through old colleagues that Trent received the news during a Monday morning meeting. Apparently, he threw a folder across the conference room. The VP of Operations demanded to know how they'd lost such a major client. Trent blamed me, of course, said I'd poached them unethically. But the timestamps told a different story. Hannah had reached out to me, not the other way around. Seated emails leaked from inside Holston Keane, forwarded to me by former co-workers who'd kept my personal contact info. Trent blamed everyone except himself for the mounting disasters. He wrote scathing emails to the team about failure to maintain relationships and lack of strategic thinking. He demanded longer hours and better results while providing no additional support or resources. Staff turnover skyrocketed. 3 account managers quit in 1 month, posting their resignations publicly on social media with carefully worded statements about pursuing opportunities at organizations that value their contributions. Recruiters started circling the remaining staff like sharks scenting blood in the water. The same people who'd laughed during that Monday meeting when Trent humiliated me were now frantically updating their LinkedIn profiles, reaching out to their networks, setting up coffee meetings with competitors. Alex, the young designer, sent me a message. "You were right. About leaving first. Wish I'd followed you sooner." I helped him polish his resume and connected him with an opening at VantageWorks. Within 2 weeks, he'd accepted. One by one, the good people were jumping ship, leaving Trent with a skeleton crew of those too afraid or too inexperienced to leave. Industry whispers started circulating at conferences and networking events. "Did you hear Holston Keane is losing its top accounts?" people asked over cocktails and coffee meetings. The marketing world is surprisingly small, and word travels fast when a respected agency starts crumbling. Former clients were sharing their experiences, Not publicly, but in private conversations that somehow always made their way to the right ears. I didn't gloat when people brought it up to me, didn't add fuel to the gossip fire. I heard that too, I'd say neutrally, then change the subject. But inside I felt something heavy lift from my shoulders, like a weight I'd been carrying for months had finally dissolved. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. Quiet, inevitable, earned justice. The truth was speaking for itself. Companies that prioritize ego over excellence eventually pay the price. Leaders who disrespect their teams eventually lose them. And clients who feel undervalued eventually leave. These were natural consequences, not orchestrated schemes. I'd simply removed myself from the situation and let reality do its work. The satisfaction I felt wasn't cruel or petty. It was the deep, settled feeling of knowing that integrity matters, that character counts, that what goes around really does come around. A former co-worker sent me screenshots late one night, evidence that Trent had been falsifying client retention statistics to upper management. The numbers he'd presented in quarterly reports didn't match the actual contract renewals. He'd been counting verbal commitments as secured renewals, padding his success metrics, while the reality was far grimmer. I stared at my phone screen in the darkness of my bedroom, reading through the documents. This was serious, not just unethical, but potentially legally problematic for the company. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let Trent's lies be his own problem. But another part of me remembered all the good people still working there, the ones who'd be hurt if the company collapsed entirely because of one man's deception. I didn't use the evidence for personal revenge or public exposure. Instead, I sent it anonymously to Holston Keynes' corporate compliance department, carefully stripping any identifying information that could trace it back to my source. I wrote a simple message. These discrepancies in reported client retention require investigation. Then I deleted the email from my sent folder and went to sleep. I'd given them the information. What they did with it was their choice now. My conscience was clear. Corporate audit. The words rippled through the industry within days. Holston Keynes' parent company launched a full investigation into reporting practices and client relations. Investors grew furious as the real numbers came to light. Retention rates were half what Trent had claimed, revenue projections were wildly optimistic fiction, and client satisfaction scores had plummeted over his tenure. 2 senior executives resigned quietly within a week, citing personal reasons that everyone knew meant they were jumping before they were pushed. The board brought in an external consulting firm to assess operations. Their report was damning. Trent's replacement plan for me and other departed staff was exposed as completely fabricated. There had never been a real succession strategy, just hollow promises and baseless confidence. My name kept appearing in client testimonials and exit interviews as the reason they'd stayed so long, and the glue that held relationships together. One client wrote in their formal complaint, Madison Cole was the only person who truly understood our needs. Since her departure, we've felt like just another account number. The documentation I'd quietly compiled months ago, the evidence of Trent's credit stealing and blame shifting, had apparently made its way to the investigators through various channels. Truth has a way of surfacing when people start digging. Months later, at an industry gala recognizing excellence in marketing campaigns, Brightleaf Foods won Best Campaign Execution for a product launch we'd developed together at VantageWorks. The ballroom was packed with hundreds of people, executives, creatives, clients, competitors. I sat at a table near the back with my team, genuinely proud of the work we'd accomplished. Hannah Lee took the stage to accept the award, elegant in a blue dress, holding the glass trophy like it was precious. She thanked her internal team, the VantageWorks crew, and then said something that made the entire room go quiet. But this wouldn't have been possible without Madison Cole, who believed in our brand when we were nobody, who stuck with us through challenges and who brought that same dedication to our new partnership. The spotlight found me in the crowd. Applause erupted. I stood awkwardly, waving, feeling my face flush. The camera panned across the room and caught Trent Lawson sitting 3 tables away, his face frozen in shock. For a moment our eyes met across the crowded ballroom. He looked older somehow, diminished, and in that instant I saw him realize the truth he'd refused to see before. He'd built his empire on sand, on borrowed credibility, on someone he'd called replaceable. A week later, news broke through industry newsletters and LinkedIn posts. Trent Lawson was no longer with Holston Keane. The announcement was brief and corporate sterile, thanking him for his service and wishing him well in future endeavours. But everyone in the industry knew what that language meant. He'd been forced out, quietly but firmly removed, after the audit revealed the extent of his mismanagement and deception. The firm's reputation was in shambles. 3 more major clients had left, taking millions in annual revenue with them. Investor confidence had cratered. The board had installed a new leadership team focused on rebuilding trust and operational excellence. Several people reached out to ask if I'd consider returning to help with the turnaround. The offers were generous, significant raise, executive title, full autonomy. Part of me was tempted by the idea of walking back into that office as their saviour, of proving beyond doubt that I'd been invaluable all along, but another part of me, the wiser part, knew that going back would be a mistake. The house of arrogance had fallen, and I didn't need to stand in its ruins to prove my worth. I politely declined all offers. "I'm happy where I am," I told them honestly, "but I wish you the best in rebuilding." And I meant it. Now I run my own small boutique agency. After 2 successful years at VantageWorks, I'd saved enough and built enough connections to launch my own firm. No glass walls or open floor plans designed for surveillance. No fake smiles or political games. Just respect, honest work, and relationships built on trust rather than fear. My team is small, 6 people who genuinely care about the work and each other. We celebrate wins together and weather losses as a unit. Clients choose us because they know they matter to us, not because we're the biggest or flashiest option. Sometimes, late at night when I'm reviewing proposals or planning strategy, I still hear Trent's voice in my memory. "You're easy to replace." The words that once felt like knives now sound almost funny, distant and hollow like an echo from another lifetime. And every time I hear them in my head, I smile, not with bitterness, but with the quiet satisfaction of someone who proved the doubters wrong simply by being excellent at what they do. I lean back in my chair, looking around my small office with its plants and natural light and photos of my team, and I think the same thought every time. Then why couldn't you? The answer, of course, is that some things can't be replaced. Trust can't be replaced. Years of relationship building can't be replaced. Genuine care and expertise can't be replaced. You can swap out a title, reassign an account, or hire a new body to fill a desk. But you can't replicate the intangible things that actually matter. The history, the understanding, the commitment to excellence over ego. Trent learned that lesson the hard way. And me? I learned something even more valuable. That my worth was never determined by someone else's opinion of it. I was never easy to replace because I was never just filling a role. I was building something real. And that's a lesson I'll carry with me forever, no matter where this journey takes me next. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being impossible to forget.